She weaponized the HOA, blocked his driveway, and called the cops, so he built a moat and a drawbridge to shut her down for good. The day DeAndre Vance pulled into his new driveway in Overland Park, Kansas, he felt like he had finally made it. Homeownership wasn't just a milestone. It was proof of everything he'd worked for. Years of long hours, skipped vacations, and sacrifices had led to this. A modern 3-bedroom house in a quiet, tree-lined neighborhood. It wasn't flashy, but it was his. He stepped out of his car, stretched his back, and took in the scene. Across the street, a man in his 50s gave a polite nod while watering his lawn. A kid zipped by on a bicycle, and a golden retriever lazed in the shade of a porch. It was the kind of place where people waved, where mailboxes weren't stuffed with junk, where kids played without parents hovering over them. Then he spotted her. A woman in her 60s stood at the edge of her perfectly manicured lawn, arms folded across her chest. A high-maintenance bob, oversized sunglasses, and a permanent scowl completed the look. She wasn't just watching. She was assessing. DeAndre had encountered plenty of people like her before, the type that didn't outright say anything but made their disapproval known in other ways. He forced a smile, raising a hand in greeting. Nothing. Instead, she turned sharply on her heel and disappeared into her house. Maybe she just wasn't friendly. Fine by him. He wasn't moving in to make best friends. But the next morning, he woke up to a bright yellow HOA violation notice taped to his front door. Grass exceeds allowable height per neighborhood standards. Please mow within 48 hours to avoid penalties. He blinked at the paper, then at his lawn. The grass had barely grown since the last mow at his apartment. It was the same length as every other lawn on the block. And then he saw her again. Gretchen Hollowell standing in her driveway watching. That's when it clicked. DeAndre had heard about HOA power trips, but this was fast. He had lived in the house less than 24 hours, and she was already on him. He could have ignored it, but he wanted a clean slate. So he mowed the lawn that afternoon. If that was all it took to keep the peace, so be it. It wasn't. The next week, another notice arrived. Trash bins must be brought in within 1 hour of pickup to maintain neighborhood aesthetics. A 1-hour window that was impossible. He had a job, and his trash was collected while he was at work. Then 2 days later, mailboxes must adhere to uniform style as specified by HOA guidelines. Please replace non-standard mailbox immediately. He checked his mailbox. Looked just like his neighbor's. Then the real kicker. Vehicle color must complement community aesthetic. Brightly colored cars are discouraged. His car was deep blue. Not neon green. Not fire truck red. Blue. That's when he knew this wasn't about rules. It was about control. He tried talking to other neighbors, hoping someone else had experienced similar treatment. The guy across the street, the one who had given him a polite nod on day one, just shrugged. Oh, Gretchen runs this place. If she's on you, it's best to just do what she says. The way he said it, resigned, like this was just the way things were, made DeAndre's stomach tighten. But he wasn't built for bending. He followed rules when they made sense. Not because someone like Gretchen Hollowell enjoyed flexing power she never actually had. Then one Saturday morning, he walked outside to find something new in his driveway. A car. Not his car. Gretchen's. Parked right in the middle, blocking his way out. And that's when he realized this wasn't just about rules anymore. This was personal. But DeAndre wasn't going to play her game. Not in the way she expected. DeAndre stood on his porch, arms crossed, staring at the silver Lexus RX sitting dead center in his driveway. Gretchen had parked it there. like she owned the pavement, like she had every right to dictate how he lived. For a second, he considered walking over, knocking on her door, and handling it the civil way. But something told him she wanted that. She wanted the confrontation, the argument, the scene. Instead, he pulled out his phone and called the Overland Park Police Department. Within 15 minutes, a cruiser rolled up and a young officer, probably no older than 30, stepped out. Officer Ryan Denton. He took one look at the Lexus, then at DeAndre. "This your property?" DeAndre nodded. "Yeah, and that's not my car." Denton sighed, already scribbling in his notepad. "All right, let's see whose it is." DeAndre didn't need to wonder. The second Gretchen spotted the flashing lights, she materialized like a ghost, stepping out of her house with her usual stiff posture. "That's my vehicle," she announced before the officer even spoke. Denton glanced up. "Ma'am, you can't park in someone else's driveway without permission." Gretchen's lips pursed. "Oh, I was just leaving. I had a minor issue with my garage door and needed to park somewhere temporarily. I'll move it right away." She didn't even try to make it sound believable. Denton looked at DeAndre. "You want it towed? Or are you okay with her moving it now?" DeAndre clenched his jaw. As much as he wanted the satisfaction of watching a tow truck haul her car away, he knew that would fuel her. It would make him look like the problem. He exhaled slowly. "She can move it." Gretchen smiled. A smug, satisfied smirk that made DeAndre's skin crawl. "I'll be more mindful next time," she said sweetly, already unlocking her car. She wasn't mindful about anything. She was testing him. And now he knew exactly what kind of battle this was. If DeAndre thought that would be the end of it, he was dead wrong. The next weekend, she did it again. This time, it wasn't just a few minutes. It was overnight. He woke up Sunday morning ready to grab coffee, only to find her Lexus sitting there like a permanent fixture. No more warnings. He called for a tow. The truck arrived within the hour, hooking up the vehicle just as Gretchen stormed outside in fuzzy slippers and a silk robe, waving her arms like she was directing air traffic. "You can't do that. I was just about to move it." The driver didn't even glance at her. "Should have thought about that earlier, lady." The car was gone in under 5 minutes. By Monday morning, the HOA retaliated. A letter appeared in DeAndre's mailbox, stamped and formal. Per neighborhood policy, no vehicle shall be towed without first seeking an HOA resolution. Violating this procedure may result in a fine or further action. There was no such policy. That afternoon, he knocked on Michael Novak's door, the HOA president. He was a pudgy man in his late 40s with graying hair and the tired expression of someone who had been bullied into leadership rather than earning it. "I didn't send that letter," Novak admitted, rubbing his face. "That was probably Gretchen." "Oh, she's running things?" DeAndre pressed. Novak hesitated, then cracked. "Tired. Look, man, I don't want trouble. She's been on the board for years and she's relentless. People just let her do her thing. It's easier. Easier." That word lodged itself in DeAndre's head like a splinter. So that's how Gretchen operated. She wore people down until they let her have control. But he wasn't wired like that. The next weekend it escalated again. Gretchen blocked the driveway, not just with her car but with 2 orange construction cones like she was directing traffic. When DeAndre moved them, she called the police on him for tampering with private property. The responding officer was different this time, Officer Jessica Patton, but the story played out the same way. "Sir, did you touch these cones?" she asked, trying to keep a straight face. DeAndre exhaled. I moved them. They were blocking my driveway. Patton turned to Gretchen. Ma'am, where did you get these cones? Gretchen folded her arms. I borrowed them from my brother. He works in construction. DeAndre laughed. Actually laughed. That's cute. What's his name? For the first time Gretchen faltered. That's irrelevant. Patton sighed, shaking her head. Ma'am, you can't just put cones in front of someone else's driveway. Gretchen scowled but snatched the cones up, stomping back toward her house. She was losing ground and she knew it. But DeAndre also knew something else. She wasn't going to stop. So it was time to change the game. And this time he wasn't just going to react, he was going to plan. DeAndre sat at his kitchen table, laptop open, flipping through pages of HOA regulations and property laws. If Gretchen wanted to play this game, fine. But he was done playing defense. He had one question in mind. How far did his property rights actually extend? A deep dive into Kansas property laws led him to an interesting discovery. His driveway was entirely within his property lines. The HOA had no jurisdiction over it. That meant whatever he chose to do with it, as long as it wasn't explicitly against city ordinances, was his business. That's when the idea hit him. Started as a joke. A moat. What if he dug one? What if, instead of just pushing back against Gretchen's antics, he made it impossible for her to interfere? The more he thought about it, the less ridiculous it sounded. A trench around the perimeter of his driveway, deep enough to prevent vehicles from crossing, with a simple drawbridge to allow his own access. Completely legal. Completely within his rights. Now he just needed someone who could make it happen. That's where Rico Alvarez came in. Rico was an engineer, a former coworker who had quit corporate life to start his own contracting business. If anyone could pull off something this absurd, it was him. You're serious? Rico asked when DeAndre pitched the idea over beers at a local bar. As a heart attack, DeAndre grinned. Rico leaned back, rubbing his chin. Man, this is some medieval-level pettiness. I love it. They spent the next few hours sketching designs. The trench didn't need to be massive, just deep enough and wide enough to stop a car. The drawbridge, a simple mechanical platform that could be raised and lowered with a hydraulic system. DeAndre made sure every detail was airtight. He checked zoning laws, ensured proper drainage, even verified with the city that no underground pipes would be disturbed. By the time they were done, Rico whistled. This is gonna make some people real mad. DeAndre smirked. That's the point. The following week, the work began. The first step was excavation. Rico and his crew showed up with shovels, pickaxes, and a small excavator. It didn't take long for the trench to start taking shape. That's when Gretchen noticed. She stormed over, eyes wide, hands on her hips. What do you think you're doing? DeAndre wiped sweat from his forehead. Making a landscaping adjustment. She sputtered. You can't just dig up your yard like this. DeAndre pulled out printed property records. Actually, I can. My land, my rules. Her face turned red. I'll have the HOA stop this. Good luck, he said, turning back to the crew. But Gretchen wasn't done. She stood there watching, arms crossed, muttering to herself, pacing. She called someone, probably the HOA board. Within an hour, a silver sedan pulled up. Michael Novak stepped out, already sweating from stress. DeAndre, buddy, can we talk? DeAndre folded his arms. Talk about what? Michael Novak gestured toward the trench. Look, I know you're frustrated, but this is a little extreme, don't you think? DeAndre raised an eyebrow. Define extreme. Is it more extreme than someone blocking my driveway for weeks? Calling the cops on me? Sending fake violation notices? Novak sighed. Listen, Gretchen can be difficult. But it's going to cause tension. DeAndre shrugged. That's not my problem. Gretchen seethed. You're making a mockery of this community. DeAndre smiled.
No.
I'm making sure you don't park in my driveway again. The next morning, a city inspector arrived. DeAndre met him outside, heart pounding. Mr. Vance, we got a report about an unauthorized construction project. DeAndre nodded. Everything is within regulation. I checked. He handed over a thick folder of documents, permits, property surveys, zoning codes. The inspector flipped through them, then looked at the trench. Well, he said, snapping the folder shut, this is a first. Gretchen, standing nearby with her arms crossed, smiled smugly. So you'll shut it down? The inspector turned to her. Nope, it's legal. The color drained from her face. DeAndre grinned. Now it was just a matter of finishing the job. The next phase was the most important, installing the drawbridge. Rico and his team worked efficiently, bringing in a small crew to lay the foundation for the hydraulic platform. Every step was done by the book, with the right permits and inspections to ensure it was all within legal limits. By now word had spread through the neighborhood. People slowed down when driving past, gawking at the growing trench like it was some kind of bizarre tourist attraction. DeAndre caught more than a few of his neighbors standing in their yards, whispering amongst themselves, some shaking their heads, others smirking like they knew exactly why this was happening. Gretchen, on the other hand, was furious. She paced her driveway, phone glued to her ear, calling anyone who would listen. The HOA, the city, maybe even a local news station for all DeAndre knew. She had lost control, and it was eating her alive. Then came the morning the drawbridge was installed. Rico's crew worked fast, mounting the steel-reinforced platform onto hydraulic hinges. When lowered, it looked like an ordinary, sturdy driveway. When raised, an impossible barricade. DeAndre watched as Rico gave it a final test run, flipping the switch to engage the system. With a low mechanical hum, the drawbridge lifted, rising at a steady angle until it completely blocked access to the driveway. Gretchen, standing across the street, lost it. This is a disgrace, she shrieked. You're turning this neighborhood into a circus. DeAndre crossed his arms, waiting for Rico to lower the drawbridge again before answering. I'm just making sure my driveway stays mine. She stomped closer, jabbing a finger at his chest. You're being childish. No respectable community would tolerate this nonsense. He leaned in slightly, keeping his voice calm. You mean, a community that lets you block my driveway for weeks? A community that bends over whenever you demand it? She clenched her fists, her face turning red. The HOA will put a stop to this. DeAndre just smirked. Funny, because the law won't. That was the moment she realized she couldn't stop him. And the best part, she had brought this on herself. But Gretchen wasn't done fighting. The next day, a new HOA notice appeared in DeAndre's mailbox. All exterior modifications must be approved by the HOA board before construction. Your recent addition is in direct violation of our guidelines and must be removed immediately. DeAndre laughed out loud. This was desperation by the book. The HOA had no say over his private property. He had already checked. The only way they could enforce their rule was if his house had an active HOA agreement tied to it. And DeAndre knew something Gretchen didn't. His lot was one of a few exceptions in the neighborhood. It was technically within the HOA's boundaries, But because of how the original contracts were written years ago, his house had never been legally tied to it. In other words, he wasn't actually under the HOA's authority, and he had the documents to prove it. Later that afternoon, he strolled right up to Michael Novak's door, holding the letter. Novak sighed as he answered, "DeAndre, listen. I don't want any more trouble." "Oh, I know," DeAndre cut in, handing him a copy of his property exemption papers. "That's why you're going to tell Gretchen to back off." Novak glanced over the documents, his eyes widening slightly. Where did you get this?" "County records," DeAndre said smoothly. "Turns out my house isn't actually under the HOA. So legally speaking, Gretchen can take her complaint and, well, let's just say it doesn't matter." Novak ran a hand down his face. "She's going to lose her mind." "She already has," DeAndre said with a smirk. "I'm just giving her something real to be mad about." Novak exhaled slowly, then muttered, "I'll handle it." And that was it. For the first time since moving in, DeAndre felt something shift. Gretchen had finally hit a wall she couldn't climb over. But she wasn't ready to accept defeat just yet. The next morning, DeAndre stepped outside with his coffee, enjoying the quiet, until he spotted Gretchen standing at the edge of his driveway. Arms folded, jaw clenched. It was a new look for her, not the usual smugness. Frustration, maybe even a little panic. He took a slow sip, raising an eyebrow. "Can I help you, Gretchen?" Her lips pressed into a thin line. "You think you're clever, don't you?" He shrugged. "I think I'm following the law, and I think you don't like that." She let out a sharp breath. "You can't just build whatever you want. This neighborhood has standards." DeAndre leaned against the porch railing. "You mean your standards, not the HOA's, not the city's, yours." Her hands curled into fists at her sides. "You're making a mockery of this community." He laughed.
No, Gretchen.
"I'm making sure you never park in my driveway again." Her face turned red. For a second he thought she might actually scream. But instead, she turned on her heel and stormed off. That should have been the end of it. But Gretchen didn't know how to lose. That afternoon, DeAndre got an email from Overland Park Code Enforcement. "We have received multiple complaints regarding an unapproved structure on your property. We will be conducting an inspection to ensure compliance with local ordinances." He smirked. She was really grasping at straws now. When the inspector showed up the next day, DeAndre was ready. A middle-aged man in a city-issued polo stepped out of his truck, clipboard in hand. "Mr. Vance, we just need to verify that your structure meets all zoning requirements." DeAndre nodded. "Of course." He handed over every document, permits, property surveys, drainage approvals. The inspector took his time, looking over them, occasionally glancing at the trench and drawbridge. After 10 minutes, he shut the folder with a nod. "Everything looks good here." Across the street, Gretchen watched from her window, blinds barely parted. DeAndre grinned. "So I can keep it?" The inspector chuckled. "I don't see why not. Honestly, this is the most creative solution to an HOA dispute I've ever seen." DeAndre clapped him on the shoulder. "Glad to hear it." As the inspector drove away, he made sure to wave at Gretchen's window. She didn't wave back, but she wasn't done yet. The next week, he noticed her talking to a group of neighbors, gesturing wildly at his house, her voice sharp and commanding. A few people nodded along. Others shifted uncomfortably. Then the new HOA letter arrived. "Due to recent disturbances, we are holding an emergency vote to amend neighborhood guidelines requiring board approval for any permanent structural changes. This vote will take place next Friday. DeAndre almost felt bad for them. They still thought they could control him. But he wasn't under the HOA, and they were about to learn that the hard way. By the time Friday rolled around, DeAndre was more amused than annoyed. Gretchen had thrown everything she could at him. Fake violations, police calls, HOA threats, even city inspections. And yet here he was, still standing, still winning. The HOA meeting was held at the local community center. A beige brick building with a dimly lit meeting hall that reeked of old coffee and cheap air freshener. The usual attendees, a mix of retirees, overzealous homeowners, and reluctant participants, filled the seats, whispering amongst themselves. Gretchen stood at the front, stiff-backed and ready for war. Next to her, Michael Novak looked like a man who wanted to be anywhere else. DeAndre took a seat near the back, arms folded, waiting. Novak cleared his throat. All right, let's get started. Tonight, we're voting on an amendment to require HOA board approval for any major exterior modifications, including driveways, fencing, and landscaping. A murmur rippled through the room. One man, Greg Sanders, a neighbor DeAndre had only spoken to in passing, raised his hand. This is about the trench, isn't it? Gretchen stiffened. This is about maintaining the integrity of our neighborhood. Greg snorted. Right? It's about control. A few heads nodded. Others shifted awkwardly, clearly unsure. Novak sighed. Let's just take the vote. Hands went up. Gretchen's smug expression returned as she counted silently, lips moving. Then she looked at Novak expectantly. That's the majority. Passes. Novak didn't look convinced. We still need to verify the exact count. But Gretchen was already beaming, eyes locking on to DeAndre like she had finally outmaneuvered him. Until he stood up. Hey, real quick, DeAndre said casually. Before you get too excited, let's clear something up. He reached into his folder and pulled out his exemption papers. I'm not under the HOA. Dead silence. Gretchen's face froze. What? DeAndre smirked. Yeah, see. My property isn't legally tied to your rules. I checked. So that vote doesn't mean a thing to me. A low chuckle came from Greg. A few other neighbors exchanged looks, some stifling smiles. Novak rubbed his temples. You've got to be kidding me. DeAndre shrugged. Nope. So you all enjoy your new rule. But it doesn't apply to me. Gretchen looked like she was going to combust. Her mouth opened and closed, her usual sharp tongue failing her. Then, in a last desperate attempt to salvage control, she snapped. You're making a spectacle out of this neighborhood. DeAndre stepped forward, voice calm but cutting.
No, Gretchen.
You did. You tried to control me. You harassed me. You wasted police resources. You wasted the city's time. And you wasted your own. All because you couldn't stand that I wouldn't fall in line. The room was dead quiet. Novak finally stood. This meeting is over. As people shuffled out, DeAndre caught Greg grinning at him. Man, I gotta shake your hand, Greg said. I haven't seen someone put her in her place like that in years. DeAndre laughed, shaking his hand. Happy to be of service. Across the room, Gretchen stood stiffly, refusing to make eye contact. For the first time since he moved in, she looked defeated. By the next week, her car never blocked his driveway again. By the next month, she stopped issuing fake complaints. And by the end of the year, Gretchen put her house on the market. DeAndre never found out if she moved because of him or if it was something else. And frankly, he didn't care. because at the end of the day he had stood his ground. And that's a lesson some people need to learn the hard way. Some fights aren't worth picking, because when you go up against the wrong person, you just might lose. Some neighbors will test your patience, but every once in a while, they mess with the wrong person. DeAndre didn't just stand his ground, he rewrote the battlefield. If you think his drawbridge should be the new standard for handling petty HOA power trips, hit that like button, share your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more wild, satisfying stories just like this one.